I went to school at the Carlos School of Mines, graduated with a degree in chemical engineering. I look back on the time, it's weird because you always think I could go back and if I could just tell myself one thing, and I look back and I think I just wasn't taking care of myself at the time. And I remember so many times where I didn't feel ready for things like exams or felt like I was rushing to get ahead of homework. And I just remember that all kind of going back to, I'm not taking care of myself. I don't feel well. I don't feel good about myself. And it all kind of starts from there. My name is Nathan Moorman. I'm 32 years old. I was born out in Pennsylvania, and then family moved to Ohio, and then from Ohio to here. I've got one older sister named Michelle. She lives in Golden. My parents are retired, and they live up in Winter Park. I started off in high school. I threw shot put and discus, and I had a lot of fun with those. So when I got to college, I kind of wanted to keep going with that. So I realized very quickly that I was way too small to throw shot put in college. I mean, it's such a huge size game. So my coaches kind of pushed me into hammer throw, which was a lot of fun. It's much more about the physics and the technique than just being a massive dude. It's pretty crazy. You have to spin. You have this ball and a wire and you start spinning around. And so we would have to do these we'd have to do these exercises to get us used to like spinning around. When you like use the bat on the floor to like spin around. People do it for fun. Like we did stuff like that for real to like get used to like spinning around. And even to this day, I'll get dizzy if I spin around really fast, but I'll recover very quickly, more than most people. But it was a good time. So when I graduated college, I did that unwise thing that some people recommend against is, graduating in a bad economy. I had a degree in chemical engineering, and a lot of the industries that I was looking to weren't hiring at the time. And so I ended up finding a pharmaceutical company that was near where my parents lived that was hiring. So I started off working for them. They're called Sandoz. I started working in production, and was there for about 2.5 years, started to work my way up, and then got laid off. So I started at another pharmaceutical company in Boulder called Corn Pharma. Again, I was working production. I started coming in on my off days to work on engineering projects and volunteering for different projects inside the company. And was starting to show some progress there in my career, but it was happening very slowly. And then literally one day out of the blue, I got a call for a job for a company called Charlotte's Web that makes dietary supplements, but they're all hemp-based. So interviewed there, got hired in less than a week, and started there back in August. So when I was in college, I had a series of relatives that had all gotten very old. They were all in their 90s, and they started to die. It was a really sad process. It's never fun losing loved ones, but the experience, I got a very up-close look at what it's like to die. And it's really sunk in. I had a great aunt who passed away, and you meet a lot of people that are kind of crushed by getting old, right? They can't live their lives the way they used to, and so it becomes harder and harder for them. And I had this great Aunt Joyce, and she never let go of life. And I was really inspired. I wanted to be like her, and she always cooked. And I had relatives that were, oh my God, my grandfather would eat like reheated beans and frozen vegetables, and it still turns my stomach to this day. But she always cooked for herself, and she always had amazing food when I was over. It was usually chicken fried steak, because that's what I loved, and biscuits. She made the best sourdough biscuits, and she always had Cokes in her refrigerator. And I just remember thinking, when I grow old, I want to be like her. So I was at her funeral, and I was talking to, her kids. They were my mom's cousins, and they were basically talking about, it wasn't all that it seemed. Towards the last years of her life especially, she never would have used the term, but she was a vegetarian. She was a Depression baby, so she grew up eating a lot of like vegetables and knew how a dozen ways to cook beans and all that. And that was the major part of her diet. She did, have the biscuits. That was once or twice a week. She did have a Coke. I found out that was not a regular part of her diet. That was like a treat. But she didn't the past few years, she didn't really eat any meat or anything like that. And it was it wasn't the first time, well, it was the first time I really thought, I have to eat better. Like, my health matters. I've just gotten a really up-close look at why it matters and why it's important. And that was kind of the first instance where I'm like, I have to start eating healthier. And if I don't do it now, like I was coming off, a time where I was out of college and I was just starting my career, and I thought if I don't get a handle on this now, like, I might never. So I got my first job, and I started off and I was living with my parents, and so I thought, here's a moment where I can invest in something. I'd thrown a hammer in college, so I had always lifted weights since high school, and I really enjoyed that, so I definitely wanted that to be a part of the mix, but I knew that I needed to do more like running and conditioning stuff, and so I'd always heard about CrossFit, and I wanted to try it, and it seemed like it would be a mix of what I needed. When we first started with the one-on-ones, yeah, I was really scared. I remember thinking that I was going to have to do like some really crazy stuff on my first day that I just wasn't going to be able to do. And I remember specifically, it was with Katie. She came in, the first thing she asked me was like, okay, can you do a squat? And I was like, yeah, I can do that, no problem. And she's like, that's great. That puts you ahead of the curve right there. That's really sticks out to me, that the first little workout we did in that first session, like it was really basic movements. I think it was like air squats, rowing, and maybe it was burpees or something like that. But I got a really great workout in like 10 minutes just based from like really simple movements. I was really excited to get into my first like class atmosphere, just because I felt like that's somewhere I would thrive, kind of the energy of the class, not just working out by yourself, or even, when you're in a busy gym, you're still basically by yourself. Everyone's off doing their own thing. So I remember, I think my first class workout was a Saturday. I came in, it was Coach Roxy. And I was really nervous that like everyone was gonna be like, oh, he's the new guy. But I really was able to like scale everything, and I was able to like work out with the group and not like, be the guy on the side that had to do something else. So there was this Friday in January that I'll remember for the rest of my life, where for whatever reason, I forget why, the new class at the time was really busy, but I was the only one that showed up that day for whatever reason. And you and I were talking, and you lobbed it over pretty gently at first, but you're like, how's the diet going? And I definitely made some positive changes in that aspect, but it was the thing that I knew I really had to change, and I hadn't yet. And so we had a good discussion. You made some recommendations, a book to check out, and at that time I was getting ready to move out on my own. So I decided at the time that I was going to try my first Whole30 when I moved out on my own to my first apartment, and this was like 6 weeks into the future. And so I read It Starts With Food, and got really scared. And then, yeah, it started a week after I moved into my new place. So things got very real. I don't know how much you remember from that time period, but I was, oh my God, I don't even know how to put it into words. It was really great, and it's something I look back and I'm so proud I did. But there's also a part of me now, it's like, okay, you didn't have to go that crazy. But I cut out a lot of stuff that I always thought that I couldn't live without, and pushed myself to really, really weird places at times. But I ended up pretty much sticking to that with about 10 weeks, because that Whole30 bled into a paleo challenge that the gym was doing. And so at the end of that 10 weeks, I'd lost, this always bugs me, it was 30.5 pounds. There's part of me like, could I have not lost half a pound more and just made it 31? But that was the major transformation for me at the time. What really sticks out to me is that was kind of like spring leading into summer, and that summer was some dark days. I'd kind of transitioned into paleo, and you had said I could have 2 hours, one night a week to eat whatever I want. And so that like changed the way I lived my whole life, basically. It was sort of, I kind of compared it at the time, sort of like looking through your world through like a pinhole. All of a sudden, all you can do is focus on one thing at a time. And for me, it was a lot of pizza. And I had these moments where it's like, oh my God, I forgot about grilled cheese. I need to have grilled cheese this week. And then, or, I need to have cream cheese and bagels this week, or like nothing's going to be okay. And so I just remember the whole summer being like that, where it was just like, just on the edge. I remember I had to go to a meeting early for work, and I had this really bad craving when I first got in. And it was just, you had to breathe through it, and you're like, it's gonna be okay, I had something else to focus on, and it kind of passed, and then it came back again. And then I looked at my hand, and I was like gripping the handrest so hard, my knuckles were turning white. And I was like, how am I on a roller coaster when I'm at work? But it was a weird time. But I think one of the things that really surprised me is that I would go all that summer and even beyond into like the next year after that. And there was some stuff that like, oh, I haven't thought about mozzarella sticks in a year. Or I realized at one point that it had been like a year since I had a drink. And I was like, I obviously, after all that shit I went through, all the stuff I just went through, I don't need it. Like, it is clear to me that the stuff that I need to be okay and not crazy and not punching walls is not alcohol. This is something I don't need. I don't need it moving forward. And so I've had these like really amazing moments where it's like, oh, I don't need that. Or I always thought that like I needed that in my life to like be okay or be happy. And it's like, I don't. And so those were some really great moments actually, where it's like, oh, I don't need this stuff as much as I thought I did. So there was a really long time, it's been for like the past 6 months, I knew that the next step for me was probably doing some kind of competition. And I was kicking around some ideas, and I was hemming and hawing about it for a really long time. But I never really forced myself to do it. Like it was a big step out of my comfort zone. And you never, as much as you acknowledge that, stepping out of your comfort zone is a good thing, you never really want to do it when it's happening. You're always like, I'm not ready, it's not time. And so, I got a new job back in August, as I kind of talked about before, and I had the opportunity to meet one of the directors of the company, and he was responsible for, basically like social outreach. And I was talking to him about, all the stuff that the company was doing and the company was sponsoring, and basically mentioned that there was going to be a CrossFit competition. And I started talking about CrossFit and how I'd been doing it for years. And before I really could say anything else, he was like, well, we'll sponsor you if you want to do it. And then I was like, oh crap, here it is. And so he didn't have a lot of details at the time, but a couple of weeks later he got back to me and he was like, do you still want to do this? And so I emailed head coach Brian Bender, basically saying like, all I need you to do is tell me not to do this. Just, give me an out here. And he pretty much emailed back saying like, no, this will be great. You'll have so much fun. And then I was like, well, damn, the ball's in my court. I kind of have to make a choice. And I felt like if I'd said no at that point, it would be me not doing it because I was afraid or I was nervous. And slowly starting to realize that that's not really a great reason to not do something. So I agreed to it. Company paid my entrance fee. And pretty much proceeded to have a low-grade panic attack for the next 2 weeks before the event happened. I had a lot of intense emails with Brian again, probably not as intense until like when I first started trying to eat healthy. I said I was going to quit a couple of times. I pretty much lost my cool a few times. I probably experienced just about every emotion in the human rainbow. But I came down to that Saturday morning and I showed up, believe it or not. And it's kind of cliche, but you realize stuff like this happens and it really comes down to your attitude. And if you're telling yourself that this is going to be miserable and this is going to be terrible, it is. And if you tell yourself, maybe it won't be, then you can move forward. And so the turkey challenge was a big step out of my comfort zone. I kept telling myself, I'm not fit enough to do this. I'm just gonna like humiliate myself. Everyone's gonna be looking at me like, why did he even bother to show up if he can't even do the workouts? So I had to kind of change some of that self-talk. And so the first event of the 6, I thought there was going to be 3 at first, and it turned out there would be 6. That was one of the shocking moments. It was a clean ladder. And it totally kicked my butt, but I knew going in, like, that's something I'm really comfortable with. Obviously, it's weightlifting, so it was something that, I knew I could do no matter what. And I did that, and God, it ripped the air out of my lungs. And I remember walking out of that and thinking, okay, I'm done. I don't need to do the rest of this. That is all the CrossFit I need for this weekend. And before I knew it, I had to do my trail run, and I'm like, well, I guess I'm doing this now. And then after that, it was all kind of downhill from there. It was a good experience overall, and I definitely had this moment kind of on Sunday where I was like, okay, what was I panicking about? This is really challenging. This is really tough. I'm certainly not setting competition on fire, but I'm here. I'm doing it, and it was a positive experience overall. So I think it really taught me how to work, how to be kind of tenacious, and you have to go at things, and you can't stop when you're not comfortable anymore, or when you're frustrated. You kind of have to keep going. You have to keep going until you reach that kind of epiphany moment, that aha point where you realize what you didn't know before. And I think that's definitely something that has come along in CrossFit, is that you can't stop just because you're not comfortable. You can't stop just because you're not having fun today. You can't stop because you're frustrated and you want to bang your head against the wall. You have to keep working until you get there, or you'll never actually get there.